been about a year and a half, I guess, since I did a video on the chicken coop and the chickens. A lot has happened. I added a forage yard for them. I don't think the city appreciates that, but I did. And then it got wrecked by a hurricane called Milton, and I had to fix it, replenish it, and just change around where things were. And then I added 4 pet cams, Wise cameras. That's the same company that makes the Roku cameras. And that was a lot of fun. I added 1, and that went all right. But I had to, of course I had to have a battery, and I already had a battery from having put in LED lights. And then my roosters that I had at the time broke the mount for it. So then I had to do something about that, so I went online and discovered there was a 2-for-1 sale, so I bought 2 cameras. And then later, I realized that I could fix the mount, sort of. I made a bracket to use the old broken camera and refurbished that, and now I had 3 cameras. And the app actually allows for 4 on a screen at once, so I bought a 4th camera. And a lot of piddling around and getting things figured out, but that's been a lot of fun to have that. And then there was another thing that happened after I got the cameras in, is I had random battery crashes. The battery would go dead about once every week, 10 days, 2 weeks, and it took me months to figure out what was wrong, and I finally figured it out. My solar panel was too small. I was going to put up a 20 watt to keep up 12 volt batteries, but for some reason Amazon put the 50 watt on sale the same as the 20 watt, so I bought the 50 watt. More is better, right? And then I discovered eventually that a 50 watt panel only puts out between 12 and 18 volts, and lithium batteries require 14.2 to charge. That means that the 50 watt panel only charges for a little bit of time during ideal conditions. Partly cloudy, it won't really charge up the batteries. And overcast, it won't charge up the batteries. And in Florida, we very rarely get clear skies, it's usually partly cloudy. So the batteries were slowly going down and weren't getting fully refurbished every day. So eventually then I installed a 100 watt panel. Now that's probably not quite what you should put in, because there's a rule of thumb about your solar panel should equal your battery capacity. That means if you have an 8 amp hour battery, that's 8 times 12, that's 96 watts, you should have a 100 watt panel, except I have a 16 amp hour. That's 192 watts. Supposedly I should have a 200 watt panel, except I only have a 100 watt. The other thing that I learned is that the cameras actually never shut off. They stop the feed to the app on your, on your tablet or phone, but they actually draw exactly the same power in standby as they do in full broadcast mode. And in my case, 4 cameras ran 500 milliamps or half an amp, and it runs that all night long. So I definitely had to have a panel big enough to completely restore the batteries every day, even under less than ideal conditions. That was a lot of piddling around because I had to make a new bracket, and the thing swivels and changes angle and yada yada yada. And then rains came in the spring, and I discovered my roof leaks. So I bought some metal waterproofing tape, and it took me about 3 tries before I got all the leaks fixed. Brewed 4 more chicks. Well, the local feed store pays extra to have the chicks sexed. I got my first batch from Tractor Supply, and they don't sex the chicks. So that's how I wound up with 2 roosters that wrecked the camera. But being a little late to the game, I wound up getting chicks the last 2 weeks, and they had trouble with the nurse or the hatchery sending the right number of chicks, the right breeds at the right time. They might come a day early. Sometimes they send them to the wrong store, and it was a lot of fun. But eventually I did, and I had used a box that was it's what the electric mower came in. It was a 24 by 40, and I used that to brood the 4 chicks. They stayed in there 2 months, and then I got them into the pen. I put them in a parallel pen beside the regular chicks, the 2-year-old chicks. And then came the fun of trying to merge flocks. And that's where I am right now, and that did not work out very well. And somewhere along the way, this company, Grub Terra, offered me a bag of treats, grub treats. Interesting company. These are black soldier fly larvae, and they raise them to the larva stage. They let them get about an inch long, and then they dry them and ship them. It takes about 20 pounds of like restaurant cast-off, garbage to raise 1 pound of flies, which is what's in this bag. And it's probably the most nutritious thing you can possibly feed your chickens. The problem I have is the pullets have never seen a grub or a mealworm, and my adult hens haven't either. So how did that go? Kind of like getting your toddlers to eat vegetables. And it isn't always that successful. I mean, there are some adults that still don't like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. But it went out pretty good. The adult hens preferred picking them up off the ground. They didn't quite understand that the grubs in the tray were the same thing as they were picking up off the ground. And the pullets, they're still in teenage la-la land. They haven't figured out anything.
1 hour later.
So that's the update. A lot has happened.